Season 3 of The Simpsons didn't have as big of a news story as The Simpsons going into competition with the biggest show at the time, The Cosby Show. And even though it did beat The Cosby Show early on, The Cosby Show was still very popular. But what was notable was that The Simpsons, while it didn't have the strong ratings that it had in the first season, I mean, it was still taking a huge chunk of numbers out of The Cosby Show's numbers. And essentially, it led to this year being the last year for The Cosby Show, and The Simpsons pretty much took over for the next 2 seasons at that anchor 8 p.m. time slot in the ratings, even beating NBC out a couple of times whenever a different world took that place in the 92-93 season. Now, by 1991, though, The Simpsons was still a very popular show, for not just for Fox, but also for primetime animation as a whole, to the point where other networks were trying to compete with The Simpsons and put their own primetime animated shows on the schedule. There was just one problem with that, as we're going to talk about with some of these shows early on. 2 networks in particular went in head first into the battle, and CBS had one with Fish Police, which was a Hanna-Barbera show featuring the voices of John Ritter, Ed Asner, Tim Curry among its cast. And it was so successful that it only lasted 6 episodes. That's it. It was only on for 6 episodes, and then it was completely gone. And before then, there was another show at ABC, which also was produced by Hanna-Barbera, and that was Capitol Critters. And again, only ran for 1 season of 13 episodes. And pretty much the biggest problems right from the get-go with both of these shows was that, unlike The Simpsons, which was written as a primetime sitcom, except it was animated, other networks just basically said, let's take these shows that could be that are probably shows you could see on Saturday morning, and basically put them in prime time, and we'll see if we can copy their success. And yeah, the truth of the matter was that you couldn't really compete with shows like Fish Police and Capitol Critters trying to knock down The Simpsons. I mean, even when CBS tried again later in '93 with Family Dog, that show didn't prove to be very successful. It would take about 3 years later for there to be a somewhat successful show to be with The Simpsons, and people started to realize, hey, why not get The Simpsons, people who worked on The Simpsons, to work on this, and that was The Critic. But even then, that show only lasted 2 seasons, and it wouldn't be until 6 years later when there would be the first big primetime animated hit since The Simpsons, and that was, of course, King of the Hill, which we'll delve into as time goes on here. But nevertheless, The Simpsons was still very popular heading into its 3rd year in 1991, and it was still going up against The Cosby Show for the majority of the season. So what do you do to try to steal away from Cosby's audience?
Billie Jean is not my lover. She's just a girl who says that I am the one. But the kid is not my son.
Yeah, getting the king of pop, Michael Jackson, will do that for you, because at the time, he was still the highest-selling artist in the world, even though his popularity kind of started to slow down a little bit. But he was still very popular, to the point where, they were still playing his music videos in prime time. Of course, later on in the season, we'll get to see one of his music videos showing in front of an episode of The Simpsons, and Fox was still airing numerous specials based off of his upcoming album, Dangerous. I mean, he was still a very popular draw by this point, so it figures, have the most popular singer in the world be on one of the most popular shows at the time. Put it together, and you got a great way to kick off your 3rd season, and that episode in particular is Stark Raving Dad. And I wish that was the only big news story I could take away from this, but there's so many things about this episode, both good and both kind of bad, but mostly because of the fact of how you're able to watch this. But we'll save that for the very end, because yeah, that's going to be another topic of discussion on its own merits. Honestly, this could be one of the longer episodes of Simptember I may do at this point. But with that said, let's get to this particular episode, of course, and that is Stark Raving Dad, the season premiere opener, kicking off on September 19th, 1991, written by Al Jean and Mike Reiss, and directed by Rich Moore. And kind of like with Dustin Hoffman last season, there was a bit of a catch with Michael Jackson's performance in the episode. So, let's kind of start off with that. What basically happened? Well, Stark Raving Dad was specifically written for Michael Jackson, a fan of the show, who had called Groening one night and offered to do a guest spot. The offer was accepted, and the script was written by Al Jean and Mike Reiss based on an idea pitched by James L. Brooks. Groening and Simon also contributed significantly to the writing of the episode. In an early version of the script, Homer decided to take his alcoholic friend Barney Gumble in for rehab, but while there, Homer begins to act crazily, so the doctors assumed he was the one to be committed. It was later changed to Homer being hospitalized for wearing a pink shirt, an idea pitched by Brooks. Michael Jackson himself even pitched several story ideas for the episode, such as Bart telling everyone in town that Michael Jackson was coming to his house. He also requested a scene. There was a scene in which he and Bart wrote a song together, and asked that a joke about Prince be changed to one about Elvis Presley. According to Gene, Jackson was not committed to the episode until after a read-through of the script was done. The read was held at Jackson manager Sandy Gallant's house, and Dan Castellaneta was 30 minutes late. Gene recalls that no one said a word, we just sat there waiting. Following the read, Jackson stipulated his conditions. He would record his speaking parts but not receive credit, as his singing voice would be performed by a sound-alike. Leon Kompowski's singing parts were performed by Kip Lennon, because Jackson wanted to play a joke on his brothers and fool them into thinking that the impersonator was him. And this isn't the first time that Kip Lennon has stepped in for Michael Jackson. A couple years prior to this, the Flintstone Kids, in their Just Say No special, where the kids were trying to get tickets for the Big Rocks concert with Michael Jackstone. Get it, Michael Jackstone. Typical Flintstones humor, but of course it was a PSA about drug abuse, and of course at the end of the episode you have the kids at the concert, and if you listen, that is definitely Kip Lennon and not Michael Jackson.
They told the girl, why don't you step over here? You wanna be cool, take a look here. They wanna do drugs and their words are really clear, so beat it down, you don't need it, say no.
So this wasn't the first time that Michael Jackson didn't sing in an episode of a show, but Jackson did show up for the recording sessions alone and did not use the special trailer that was set up for him. According to Gene, Jackson did record versions of the singing parts, and while there had been rumors that those parts were the ones used in the final episode, The Simpsons music editor Chris Ledesma has stated that the Lennon versions were used. Kompowski's normal speaking voice, which is heard at the end of the episode, was recorded, of course, by Hank Azaria, and the original ending for the episode was supposed to end with Kompowski singing a portion of Man in the Mirror in his Michael Jackson voice as he walked down the road, but it was changed to him singing the beginning of Happy Birthday, Lisa. Stark Raving Dad was the final episode of the Season 2 production run, but aired as the premiere of Season 3 over a year after it was completed. Michael Jackson was credited with a pseudonym John J. Smith in the closing credits. At the time, the producers of the show were legally prohibited from confirming that Jackson guest starred, although many media sources assumed it was really him. And hell, the promos literally said, Michael Jackson's in the season premiere of The Simpsons. Similarly, as I said before, Dustin Hoffman used the same thing for Sam Eddick for Lisa's substitute. And after Stark Raving Dad, the producers decided that if a celebrity wished to guest star on the show, they had to be willing to be credited under their real name. So we've kind of talked about how this episode came to be. What about the actual episode itself? How does it fare off after all these years? And why are you having a hard time trying to find it? Let's take a look at the premise here. Homer's sanity is called into question when he arrives at work wearing a pink shirt. After Bart takes Homer's mental stability test for him, Homer's committed to a mental hospital where he meets a big, hulking, bald man who says his name is Michael Jackson, played by Michael Jackson. Meanwhile, Lisa is depressed over her upcoming 8th birthday, but is very happy in the end to receive a song that is written specifically for her birthday. And not only do I think that this was a great episode, I put this one very high up on my all-time favorite episodes of the show. Outside of the regular guest stars of the show, Michael Jackson, I think, was probably the best guest star the show has ever had. He does a very good job as Homer's roommate, and as weird as it is that Kip Lennon is doing his singing voice, the dude's actually not that bad of a Jackson impersonator. You can see why he used him for these other projects that he was involved in, like the aforementioned Flintstone Kids special. Despite that, I think the first part of the story is kind of a little too much. I mean, seriously, Homer puts on a pink shirt and suddenly he's the crazy one. I see more people that work in stores and office buildings wearing pink shirts. Not a lot, but it's not uncommon. I don't know, maybe it was just because of 1991 standards back then. I don't know, but the worst part of it all is that this could have been prevented had Bart not act like a complete dick and just told the truth, or even better, Homer should have taken the quiz and stuff instead of just giving it to Bart to screw it up. I mean, seriously, the whole thing could have been prevented if Homer had just taken the damn quiz, but then again, we wouldn't have an episode if we had to do that. But after that, once the second act gets going, the story really does pick up, and the overall way the story moves forward is done incredibly well, and it does lead to that nice song at the end that Bart and Michael decide to do for Lisa's birthday, which is so good. And you see, there's so many different versions of this song. There's the one that you hear in the special itself, the episode itself. There's one that Michael Jackson himself did that was later seen on the Dangerous album, which was released not too long after this episode aired. And then there's the one at the end of the show, which I think is probably the best rendition, the credit version. But the low point of the episode that really kind of got to me, honestly, was the twist at the end where it's revealed that Michael Jackson wasn't really Michael Jackson, but it was just this guy who's a bricklayer from Paterson, New Jersey. And he explains that he had been very angry for most of his life, but found some peace in pretending to be Jackson before talking in his voice, making everyone happy around him. And so he bids farewell to The Simpsons, walks down the road and sings Lisa's song to himself, this time in his normal voice. And to the episode's credit, they really don't expect you to believe that Michael Jackson's this big, overweight guy with no hair, so it's not like it was a huge shocker at all, but honestly, it still doesn't really make all that much sense, and the episode just kind of passes over, and it feels like they left it open for another episode to tell the story of this guy, which coincidentally was the intention all along, as it was later revealed, not but a year after the episode aired, that the writers were going to make a sequel where Kompowski returned, this time acting like the musician Prince, and the episode was going to be written by Conan O'Brien, who did the polishing of the script and was a freelance writer for The Simpsons. And in the plot of the episode, according to Mike Reiss, the episode saw Kompowski Prince managing to get everyone in the town to loosen up, becoming more flamboyant, and becoming more sexually open. The script was sent to Prince, who agreed to voice the character and sent back a page of his notes about what he would be wearing in various scenes. The writers were confused when the notes didn't correspond to the script, and they discovered that Prince was referring to a script that they had been written for someone else. Prince disliked the Simpsons writer's script and demanded the other one be made into an episode, but the writers refused. The episode eventually fell through and never made it past written form, and it became one of the more few complete scripts never to be produced. And let's be honest, that's probably a good thing, because that just sounds way too insane for The Simpsons, but keep in mind what happened 20 years later with Lisa Goes Gaga, with the episode with Lady Gaga, and that to me I think is one of the worst episodes this show has ever done, and it does everything wrong that Stark Raving Dad did right. This is a great episode. This is one that has a great guest spot by Michael Jackson, a good story that gets going once the second act gets going. The emotional moments are nicely done, the song at the end is great, the animation is really good. I feel like the ending could have been better handled, but flaws aside, it's still one of my favorite Simpsons episodes of all time. And I hope you still have those Season 3 DVD sets, because that's the only way you're going to see them, because sure enough, remember that documentary, Leaving Neverland, you know, that HBO documentary that was supposed to be, that came out around the time of the Me Too movement and was supposed to go dig deeper into the grave of Michael Jackson and saying that, we're gonna keep throwing these slanderous accusations at you, even though you've been lying in a grave for the last 10 years. Because a completely biased documentary that's one-sided on HBO says we should all hate Michael Jackson for shit anybody who grew up in the 80s and 90s already knew about him. Seriously, I've never seen somebody so one-sided and filled with so many slanderous accusations against somebody that we already knew, and people still bought it as new shit. We get it. Michael Jackson was a weird person, the great musician that he is, but to see something this biased and trying to convince people of something damaging and new, but any person with a brain and knowledge of the past knows this shit already, the Jackson State called it the right way. It's a taboo character assassination, and instead of tarnishing Jackson's legacy, it actually helped boost the sales of his music in retaliation. So in all this effort to kill Michael Jackson's legacy, the people who made this movie actually made his legacy just as strong as it was before. So, oops, big mistake there, but don't worry, we're going to get him again, because guess what? They're making a sequel to this. You know, because if you failed the first time around, then clearly you're not going to fail the second time around. And sadly, because of all this, you can still not find this episode on Disney Plus or on Hulu at all. The only way you can find this episode is if you look deep onto the internet, or if you have the Season 3 DVD sets, because that's the only way you're going to see this episode anywhere. They pulled it out of rotation and syndication. It's never played on, it's only played a few times on FX before the controversy happened, and ever since then, it has not been seen on TV since. And, you know, it was because of the people behind the scenes, too. Producer James L. Brooks said that they pulled the episode strictly because, they admit this was a treasured episode. There's a lot of great memories we had wrapped up in that one, and this certainly doesn't allow them to remain. I'm against book burning of any kind, but this is our book, and we're allowed to take out a chapter. Gene said he believed that Jackson had used the episode to groom boys for sexual abuse, although he added, I really don't know, and I should be very careful because this is not something I know personally, but as far as what I think, that's what I think. None of Jackson's accusers claim that Jackson used this or any episode to groom them. Nevertheless, this is the only episode not available for streaming on Disney Plus, and its removal is controversial. It's a decision that makes no sense whatsoever. It's a harmless episode, and like I said, even the guys who made that documentary, Leaving Neverland, never said the episode did anything to them, so why take it out of circulation and tell people, go fuck yourself, you're not going to watch it? It's such an asinine decision, and you would expect a lot better from people who've been in this business long enough than the people behind The Simpsons to know that there is nothing wrong with this episode at all having to be banned. This isn't like when they banned The City of New York versus Homer Simpson after September 11th, when you can make the argument that that they had to do that because of respecting the people who lost their lives in the attacks on the World Trade Center, and then they brought it back out of syndication a few years later. This is just a decision that seems like a last-ditch effort by showmakers to appeal to the, quote, woke young audience who suddenly watch Leaving Neverland and think that they know everything they need to know about Michael Jackson. It's just about as baffling as when they got rid of Apu, and people got mad about the character who had been there for 30 years of existence with no problems whatsoever, but because there was that one documentary that came out, and now everybody's joining in because, hey, it's a movement, we gotta get rid of this character. It just makes no sense at all. Nothing about this whole thing makes any sense whatsoever, and the fact that they kept this episode is still not available to people unless you have those DVDs. It's asinine. It's completely and 100% asinine. Of all the decisions the Simpsons team has done in their history, this is still one of the most baffling and stupidest decisions ever, not having this episode out there in any way, shape, or form. The fact that Stark Raving Dad may never see the light of day game on any other format besides the Season 3 DVD releases is just a damn shame. This is coming from one of the show's biggest fans, and somebody who really loves this episode. I'm begging you people, if you can, find this episode out there. See it for what it really is, a classic episode of a classic show from the early 90s with a great guest star by one of the greatest musicians of all time, Michael Jackson. It has memorable moments, a great song. It's definitely one of the show's best. People need to go out there and see this episode for what it is if you haven't already, because you are doing yourself a major disservice by not giving it the proper respect it deserves. Seek out Stark Raving Dad. I'm telling you folks out there, you're not going to be disappointed by it one bit, and you'll be just like me. You'll want this episode back out on the circuits again.
Take it away, Reiss.